a NoMoreStinkyMonkeys.com production. This next duo formed after leaving a semi-successful punk band in England and creating a new way of making music. Their second album was a monster hit, but I didn't care for the cold way the music was produced, and especially the icy voice of the lead singer. But 2 years later, they opened up their sound, and their first single became one of my favorite songs in the 1980s. From then on, I became a big fan and considered the lead singer one of the greatest singers in the history of rock and roll. That's why they are number 153, the Eurythmics, starring Annie Lennox. Annie was working in a restaurant in London in 1975 when she met Dave Stewart. They started a friendship and then became a couple and joined a punk band called The Catch in 1976. The band eventually became known as the Tourists and had some success for the next few years before problems with management, record labels, and publishing soured the experience. The band broke up in 1980, and in 1981, while on vacation in Australia, singer Lennox and guitarist Stewart decided to form a duo and record pop the way they really wanted to, using electronics and synthesizers and getting away from the typical band format. They would even travel on the road together by themselves with just their few synthesizers in the back of a van. They released their first album that year, and it was a flop. But they were energized by the experience and took a loan to build an 8-track recording system in their house. Without having to pay for expensive studio time, they were able to create their second album, Sweet Dreams Are Made of This. That album and its title song was a huge international success. Lennox and Stewart were already broken up by this time, but were on fire creatively. Lennox had got a crew cut and colored it orange, similar to David Bowie's Ziggy Stardust. With her pale skin, hypnotic eyes, and incredible facial bone structure, she was a natural to get on many magazine covers like Rolling Stone and Newsweek. I was a big fan of Newsweek back then, since my parents had a subscription, and an issue came out, I think, in 1983, with Boy George and Lennox on the cover, talking about a second British invasion for music. I read that issue cover to cover. Without MTV, that was the first time I had seen Lennox, and being a Bowie fan, I was impressed by the homage. But I didn't care for her music. Sweet Dreams and Here Comes the Rain Again were not for me. It was cold and I felt soulless. Without real instruments, it felt synthetic. Funny that they should call it synth pop. That was at a time when I was getting heavily into Prince, R&B, and digging into his musical roots with Stax Records and Motown. The Eurythmics felt like anti-Motown. Well, Stewart became a much sought-after producer, and his work was heard on a lot of different albums. And that experience must have inspired him, because when they recorded their third album, Mr. Electronica, started to incorporate a lot more live musicians, and the result was a much warmer and soulful feel. It also took this cold Lennox voice and opened it up, and as she was now challenged by this loud band in the background. The effect was stunning. Would I Lie to You was a huge hit, but blew my mind because now we heard a white woman with the kind of voice that would challenge the big black female singers of the 60s, women like Aretha Franklin and Gladys Knight. It was the most incredible transformation. I was like, where was that voice 2 years ago? Funnily enough, on another hit off the same album, called Sisters Are Doing It For Themselves, Lennox teams up with Aretha Franklin, and it's a fantastic duet. A year later, they released their fourth album and had another incredible hit on it called Missionary Man. The duo broke up in 1990, but for 5 or 6 years, they were one of the best bands of the 80s. Believe me, I would not lie to you. From the Freditor.